chapter 14, the last chapter, we're let in on what's happening in the Great Divorce. Lewis realizes that what he's seeing is a vision or a dream. And at the same time, that vision comes to a very dramatic conclusion. MacDonald begins the chapter by addressing a question that actually he's raised not just in the last chapter, but first way back in chapter 9. MacDonald was trying to help Lewis understand the difficulty of how human choices in time affect that soul for eternity. We are creatures that are in time, and so it's very hard for us to think outside time, which is, of course, what eternity is, to be completely outside time. Time is the water we swim in, and yet time is not all there is. At the beginning of 14, the land that Lewis has been walking around in disappears, and Lewis sees a little silver table with figures like chessmen, and they're being guided by great presences that stand by. The figures, he understands, are the people on earth. The table is time, and the great presences are the immortal souls of these men and women whom the pieces on the chess table are being moved by. They're representatives. Lewis asks whether all the conversations they've been overhearing between the ghosts and the solid people imitate the choices on earth, to which MacDonald responds that one could just as easily say that they are anticipations of the great choice at the end. But both of these accounts are unsatisfactory. Let's go back to chapter 9 and take a look at what MacDonald had said earlier there. When Lewis was asking about eternity and asking about the way in which choices in this life affect eternity, MacDonald tried to get him to understand that what it is that happens in this life, in our earthly life, is a way of eternity already beginning. When a good man suffers and says that there's no future happiness that could make up for this suffering, perhaps a loved one being greatly injured or dying. And likewise, a sinner who, pursuit of some kind of earthly good in a perverse way, says, hey, let me just have this, and I'll take the consequences. They don't recognize that, in a way, for the good man, if he is able to make his way through that difficulty and to unite himself with God, that somehow, even in his suffering, that beatitude would work backwards and lighten that suffering. And for the sinner, that if he holds on to that worldly good that he loves in a perverse way, that should he persevere in that and be damned, that damnation would work backwards and even poison that pleasure, even poison happiness or modicum of happiness he thinks that sin is going to offer him. The bad man's past already conforms to his badness and fills it only with dreariness. And the good man's past begins to change so that his forgiven sins and remembered sorrows take on the quality of heaven. In this way, the blessed could actually say, we have never lived anywhere but in heaven. And the lost could say, we have always been in hell. And both would speak truly. Right? Lewis is trying to get us to see that if we try to put too great an opposition between this life and the next life, between time and eternity, we fail to understand the way in which our choices in this life are creating a state within us, which after this life would then make us fit for union with God or unfit for that union, would make us open to this great happiness that God is offering, or more and more closed in, such that we can no longer receive what he's offering. In Mere Christianity, Lewis gives a helpful account of Christian morality precisely in this question of the relation of time and eternity. Many people look at Christian morality and they think of it as God saying to them, here are a lot of rules, and if you follow them, do them all, I'll reward you. And if you don't, I'll do the other thing. And that's simply not a helpful way of looking at it. A better way would be that every time you make a choice, you are turning that central part of you, your heart, your spirit, your soul, you're making it a little different from what it was before. And taking your life as a whole, with all of your choices put together, slowly you're turning this most important part of you, your will, your heart, your soul, into either a heavenly creature or a hellish creature. Either a creature that's in harmony with God or a creature that's in a state of war with God. To be one kind of creature is heaven. That is the enjoyment of peace and knowledge and power. To be the other means a rejection of all that. Madness, horror, idiocy, rage, impotence, loneliness. Each of us, at each moment, is progressing toward the one state or toward the other. In pagan religions, and unfortunately for some number of Christians, I think there's a tendency to think purely in externals, that I have so many good deeds and this outweighs my bad deeds and therefore I should be saved. It's as if you're just collecting merit badges, like having your bear badge, your wolf badge, your golden arrow, your silver arrow. Lewis helps us understand that we're saved by becoming a certain kind of person, a child of God, and that through Christ's death, our natural selves are killed, and we are reborn and remade in Him. The Christian life is nothing less than this. Well, what happens at the end? Remember that we're told that the dark town is always in twilight, but there are signs that it's going to become completely dark. So the dark town is a kind of purgatory, or a kind of beginning of purgatory. But the complete darkness, that is hell. Likewise, they're on this outer part of heaven, what MacDonald wants to call the valley of the shadow of life. And all during these conversations they've been having, the sun has been constantly rising, but never quite showing itself. It's always in this perpetual state of dawn. Well, once the sun actually rises, bam! All of these rays of sunlight pierce through Lewis's ghostly self, and he wakes up to realize that in fact he's in his own room, and the sounds that he's hearing are an air raid siren. Remember, these stories are all written with the backdrop of World War II. So the dawn is the entrance into divine glory, and this is something that Lewis doesn't make. But it's a dream. He wakes up, the sun rises, the beams cut through him, and he wakes to realize that in fact he is in his own rooms. Hopefully the vision will stay with him and will be something that will help encourage him in his walk with Christ forward. In the next segment, what we'll do is make some concluding remarks about the Great Divorce as a whole.